Thank you for joining us. The Saudi Arabian government now says Jamal Khashoggi died during a fistfight at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. The announcement came more than 2 weeks after Khashoggi entered the consulate and was never seen again. CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams is in Istanbul with the latest.
In the middle of the night, local time, Saudi Arabia finally admitted that Jamal Khashoggi had died inside the Saudi consulate, in the words of an official statement, after getting into a fight and a quarrel that led to his death. The kingdom expresses its deep regret, it went on. 18 Saudi nationals have been arrested by their government and several officials have been fired, including the former deputy head of intelligence, thought to have been close to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Saudi Arabia's explanation has left many people deeply sceptical. Khashoggi was a veteran journalist and outspoken critic of the Saudi government, and he apparently entered the consulate here to get paperwork he needed to marry his Turkish fiancée.
He'd been living in exile in the US since last year over fears for his safety. But the Saudi explanation was a good first step, proclaimed President Trump, and once again argued against cancelling lucrative US military contracts with Saudi Arabia.
What I would prefer that we don't use as retribution, cancelling $110 billion worth of work, which means 600,000 jobs.
Turkish officials, speaking anonymously, have told journalists they believe Khashoggi was tortured, murdered and dismembered inside the consulate by a 15-man Saudi team that left Turkey soon afterwards. Several of them reportedly had links to the Crown Prince, including one who apparently accompanied the prince to the US this year. The prince, in what some will see as an irony, has now been put in charge of a committee to reform the country's intelligence agency.
And Holly Williams joins us now with more. Holly, where does this leave the Saudi Crown Prince? He's got many close connections to those who have been fired or arrested.
Well, Rena, I think there's no question at all that it's hugely damaging to him. The Saudi government has spent just colossal sums of money in the last year or so, burnishing his image as a reformer, as a liberaliser, as the young prince who's going to somehow lead Saudi Arabia into a modern economy and a more moderate form of Islam. Instead, I think a lot of people now, when they think of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, will think of the events that have transpired here in Istanbul over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And you have to assume that there are businesses and governments that will now see interactions with him more as a liability than anything else. And there will be many people who continue to suspect that his connection with the death of Jamal Khashoggi is much closer than the Saudi authorities have acknowledged. On the other hand, we've heard time and time again from President Trump saying that he doesn't want what happened here to do too much damage to the relationship, and in particular the economic relationship. I think the big question is what happens inside Saudi Arabia. It's not a democracy. It's not a country with a free press or a place where people enjoy freedom of speech. But the big question is whether he continues to enjoy the support of the Saudi elite and the rest of the Saudi royal family. And I guess we'll know the answer to that in the days and perhaps months to come.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's had an ironclad fist rule over that entire tribe there. It's interesting to see exactly how that shakes down. I'm curious, though, Holly, about the body. Have Saudi officials said anything about where Khashoggi's body is?
Nothing at all so far. That's obviously a huge question. Turkish investigators spent 8 or 9 hours this past week searching the Saudi consulate, which is just behind me. They also spent several hours searching the Saudi Consul General's residence, which is a few hundred yards from here. There's been a lot of speculation in the media that Jamal Khashoggi's body might have been somehow disposed of there. There was also reportedly an expansion of the search to a forest on the outskirts of Istanbul. That forest is almost the size of Manhattan. We haven't confirmed that the search actually took place there. And also reportedly to a farmhouse outside of Istanbul. But neither the Saudis nor the Turks have told us that they know the whereabouts of the body. And you can imagine how this feels for the family and friends of Jamal Khashoggi. We spoke to one of Khashoggi's friends here today who said, we just want the body so we can hold a proper funeral.
Of course, you can understand that. You know, the Saudi accounts and the Turkish accounts are so different as to what happened inside that consulate. Have the Turks responded to the Saudi claims?
They haven't responded at all so far, and I think it's worth pointing out how the Turks have played this so far since Jamal Khashoggi disappeared on October 7th. Now, off the record, speaking anonymously to journalists, the Turkish officials have been leaking details about what they suspected happened inside the consulate. They said they suspected that Khashoggi was murdered, his body dismembered. There was a lot of talk about an audio recording said to be from inside the consulate in which you could hear Jamal Khashoggi being tortured, murdered and dismembered, but none of that has ever been said on the record by Turkish officials. On the record, they've said, we want to know where he is. Saudi Arabia should show where he is. They haven't even acknowledged publicly that they actually have that audio recording that has been talked about so much. So I guess the question now is whether or not in the days to come, Turkey will come out and aggressively challenge Saudi Arabia's version of events, or whether perhaps, this is speculative, but perhaps behind the scenes, some kind of an arrangement, some kind of an agreement has been reached between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, where the Turks won't publicly do that.
All right, Holly Williams on the ground in Istanbul.